Drug companies are no longer driven by a desire to heal. They're solely driven by profit, and that greed is helping to put some very dangerous drugs on the market. Joining me now to talk about some of the most dangerous drugs that are in the hands of consumers right now is attorney Ned McWilliams. Ned McWilliams, another drug out there killing Americans. FDA, just the same story. FDA dropping the ball, FDA not doing their job. And now we have another product that has potential to kill thousands of Americans. Xarelto, tell us about it.
Yeah, it's another one of these drugs that the FDA is quick to approve for atrial fibrillation. That's causing not the potential to cause thousands of deaths, but it is causing and has caused thousands of deaths. It's another one of these drugs. It's a race to the market to get a drug that doesn't require a monitoring of the blood, which is what everyone thinks they need as an alternative to warfarin. And really what they're not telling folks is that if they did monitor the blood, they could be saving lots of these lives as opposed to causing all these unnecessarily lost lives.
Ned, explain what kind of drug this is.
It's called the new or novel oral anticoagulants. There's Eliquis is in the same class, Xarelto, and there's even a new fourth one that's coming down the pike. And they're all the same in that they're supposed to be as good or better than warfarin, but you don't have to go to your doctor on a regular basis to have your blood tested. And they are touting this as an advantage, as a benefit over warfarin. Therefore, as a reason to charge so much more for the drug, because these drugs are like $3,000 a year versus $400 a year for warfarin.
Ned, you've actually seen the working documents. You've seen some comparatives with warfarin. For example, warfarin has been on the market 60 years or so. We know that its morbidity rate is way low compared to Xarelto, but you've actually seen the numbers of comparatives on warfarin that is a proven drug in Xarelto that's Johnny-come-lately on the market, just a cash cow that this company's trying to develop. Tell me about it.
Yeah, there's a patient safety network out there called the Institute for Safe Medicine Practice, and they track this sort of thing. It's called Adverse Event Reporting System, and what they do is they basically keep track to see how many events are reported of patients suffering serious or fatal bleeds on Xarelto or warfarin or any drug for that matter. And what they found is that Xarelto is now out-tracking all other drugs in the class, and it now accounts for it's the #1 serious adverse event reported drug in the country.
Ned, how did they get away with this for so long? What I mean is that when you saw the comparatives, you had Xarelto saying, "Look, we're the new drug to solve atrial fib. I mean, we're going to solve that problem." And it was almost as if warfarin was old news, no longer relevant. And then they come out with comparatives that look like it's a safer drug. How do they do that and have the FDA not catch those kinds of things?
It's inexcusable. I don't know what the explanation is, but it's sitting right there. I mean, the fact that we're able to see it so easily, the FDA should have been able to see it as easily. I mean, the fact of the matter is their clinical trial did not establish efficacy for this drug. It's because what it is, it's called a head-to-head trial. So what you do is you compare the number of bleeds and strokes with the new drug with the number of bleeds and strokes that you saw with the time-tested warfarin. And what they found was the numbers were about the same. But the thing about warfarin is that it's all about how you manage it. Warfarin it's not as simple as you just take the medicine and you forget it. You have to manage the patients. You have to make sure they're not taking interfering foods or other drugs. And there's a way to measure it. It's called time in therapeutic range. And the time in therapeutic range for the warfarin patients in the Xarelto clinical trial was abysmal. It was terrible. It was in the 50% range. So any drug is going to look good compared to that.
Okay, so you have Xarelto come on the market. You have the Madison Avenue type saying, gee, this is the best drug because, A, you don't have to monitor. And if you don't have to monitor, there's going to be better patient cooperation. If you don't have to monitor, patients are going to be more willing to use the drug, which is nonsense. I mean, if
I don't know if you've seen the commercial recently, Pat, but the way they're really preying on people now is they're saying, oh, now you can finally go to Europe for the summer. You don't have to be stuck in the museums. That's the Xarelto commercial I saw just this weekend.
Well, okay, so the idea is we're seeing all the drug companies basically take the decision-making away from the doctor, and what they're doing with direct-to-consumer marketing is they're brainwashing the patient to then go to the doctor and ask for these medicines. In other words, it's a complete reversal. You got somebody out there that's on warfarin, they're doing just fine, they've taken it for 10 or 12 years, no problem with atrial fib, they don't mind monitoring, and then the next day they hear a Xarelto commercial and they say, well, doc, I want to take Xarelto, and you have the company actually selling the patient, so the patient will go sell the doctor. Aren't you seeing that a lot, not just in Xarelto?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, not just with Xarelto. We saw this with other products we've worked on, and these drug companies know that if a patient goes in and asks for a drug by name, that 9 out of 10 doctors will prescribe it to that patient, even if it's off-label, which is frightening. It shows you how doctors just want to appease their patients. It's easier to write them a prescription rather than to provide them a 20-minute consult on why this drug may not be best for them.
Isn't this why they don't allow direct-to-consumer marketing in so many countries? I mean, isn't this part of the problem? They know the statistics. They know that when somebody is fearful of their health, that they want to take every bit of advice they can, sometimes contrary to the doctor's advice, because, look, they sit in front of a television set, they see a 30-second spot. The spot says, this is the solution. Go tell your doctor you want this and you're going to be well. That shouldn't be allowed in this country, just like it's not allowed in so many other countries.
It's not just so many countries. I believe the United States and New Zealand are the only countries in the world that allow direct-to-consumer advertising. And I know just from speaking with professionals around the world, they think it's just such an odd system we have here that they're able to market these drugs to individual patients who really don't have the right or the power to decide whether or not they take them. It's up to the doctor. It's a doctor who has to write the prescription, but clearly that shows you the power of the patient, because otherwise, why would they spend hundreds of millions of dollars advertising?
One reason they're trying to kick the doctor out of the decision making, we saw in a case you and I handled last year on Yaz. Yaz was a birth control. We settled that case nationally for all the women who had strokes, had died for just horrendous kinds of things. But we saw in that case that they had done research. And they understand if they can scare the hell out of the patient, then that patient will do whatever it takes to demand from the doctor that they they get that medication. Plus, we also saw the second part of that. The second part was the company wasn't even telling the truth to the doctor about how dangerous the product was.
Right. It's disease mongering. Like what we saw with Yaz is they invent a disease. They call it disease state awareness. So really what they are, they're inventing a disease. Like erectile dysfunction wasn't a real disease, but until they had a medicine to sell you to treat it. And the same thing is true with premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is what they did with Yaz, and similar to what they're doing with right now with atrial fibrillation drugs. Lots of these patients that are on Xarelto, Eliquis, they would be just fine and actually much safer if they just took aspirin. They don't even need to be on warfarin. They could just be on aspirin. But they've convinced this larger group of people that they need treatment and they need to go to their doctor right away. Otherwise, like you said, they put the fear of God in them. It
is fear-mongering at its worst, and the Xarelto product is Exhibit A. I would advise people they need to go back to the doctor and ask about Xarelto again. The numbers I'm seeing are staggering, and they're scary. Ned McWilliams, thank you for joining me, okay?